Hey there! Welcome to Ipsy Digs It. I'm Ipsy, and on today's video, we're doing something a little different than normal. I'm not sure you're aware of this, but I'm a pretty big fan of the romance genre. Romance movies, romance TV shows, romance novels. If it's out there, I've most likely consumed it. And for a very long time, the romance genre almost felt like a taboo topic, especially when it came to novels. If you happen to be a fan of romance, then more often than not you are seen as sappy and emotional with your head in the clouds. And you better not be caught reading a romance novel in public. Thankfully, the conversation about the romance genre seems to be headed in a different, more positive direction. Not only are women starting to talk proudly about their favorite romance movies, TV shows, and novels, but now men are also starting to get in on the action. Or at least feeling more confident to express their interest. Personally, I think a lot of this positivity towards the genre can be credited to the conversations happening on TikTok. Conversations about the overall feminine experience. I'm even seeing clips of famous actors expressing interest in starring in romance movies, which is really exciting. It gives me hope that maybe in the near future we will start to see some quality romance movies coming out of Hollywood again. Because if I'm being honest, it's been a really long time since I've seen a new, great romantic movie. If it's somewhat decent and from the last decade, it's probably a book adaptation. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's certainly going to keep me busy for a while on this channel, since talking about adaptations is something that I love to do. But as far as original ideas, I think the last romantic movie I saw maybe Warm Bodies in 2013, which technically is also an adaptation since it's based off of Romeo and Juliet, except if Romeo and Juliet had zombies instead of Capulets, and if Romeo and Juliet both lived at the end. So what exactly is going on with Hollywood? Has the decades of smack talk convinced them that the romance genre isn't worth investing in anymore? There's definitely been an increase in romantic TV shows, with shows as intense and steamy as Bridgerton, Normal People, and Early Bird. It kind of makes me wonder if maybe that's where the genre belongs. In television, you have time to create that tension, that chemistry. Can movies really compete with that? As you can see, this topic has stirred a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions. It made me wonder if the romantic movies I watched growing up were as good as I actually remember them being. To try and find answers to my questions, I decided to return to the most memorable romantic movie era of my lifetime, the 1990s. I wanted to not only rewatch my favorites, but also share them with you. Get some of these romantic movies back on people's radar. When I started to make a list of my top 10 romantic movies from the 1990s, I hit a bit of a snag. The top 10 list very quickly turned into a top 30 list, and then turned into a top 50 list. And these are just titles that I recognized, movies that I have already seen. And I found myself in a bit of a pickle. A good pickle, because here were over 50 romantic movies that I remember watching, and I'm struggling to remove them from the list because most of them, it's been over a decade since I last seen them. How can I pick a top 10 or a top 20 romantic movies from the 1990s if I barely remember the plot for some of them, let alone whether the chemistry between the characters was any good? And what if age and experience has changed the way that I feel about the movie? What if something that was romantic 15, 20 years ago doesn't feel that way anymore? So instead of sharing a top 10 romantic movies from the 1990s, I'm going to rewatch all of them and then share my thoughts in a video series. They'll still be in groups of 10, it'll just be a random grouping of 10 for each video. After I finish watching them all, then I'll make a final video where I figure out which one's my favorite in a bracket elimination style competition. That seems the easiest way to narrow down my favorites. Just take them on two at a time. Oh no, okay, good. Jesus. Oh, I thought I muted myself. That would have been bad. So if you'd like to hear some non-spoiler movie reviews and get a few romantic movie suggestions, subscribe to the channel and join me for the journey. Now, before we get started, I think it's important that I define for you exactly what I consider to be a romantic movie. The Google definition of a romance film says, romance films involve romantic love stories recorded in visual media or broadcast in theaters or on television that focus on passion, emotion, and the affectionate romantic involvement of the main characters. Obviously, I agree, a romantic movie has to include some element of romance. But when you look at most films, I'd argue there are very few that don't include some element of romance in them. For me, a romantic movie wouldn't happen without the romance. There would be no story to tell. Let's use two 90s sci-fi movies as an example. You've got Gattaca and Fifth Element, both of which include a budding romance as a key part of their plot. In Gattaca, if you remove the romance between Vincent and Irene, in my opinion, there's still a very compelling story to be told. But without the romance between Corbin and Lilu, what story is left to tell? So if the story's chain of events would be different or maybe not even happen without the romance, then I would consider that to be a romantic movie. Now, my definition of a romantic movie may be a little more liberal than the average person. I'm sure there are a ton of people that would not consider Fifth Element to be a romance. Or maybe they would consider it a romance, just not under the definition that I've used. And I'm also the type of person who would classify Die Hard as a Christmas movie, so I don't doubt that my generous interpretation of a romance movie is probably how I ended up with over 50 on my list. But that's okay, because this is going to be a really fun trip down memory lane. Speaking of which, let's get into the first 10 movies I watched for this series. In today's video, we're going to be discussing Cutting Edge, Untamed Heart, It Could Happen to You, While You Were Sleeping, One Fine Day, Jerry Maguire, A Life Less Ordinary, As Good as It Gets, Sliding Doors, You've Got Mail. Now, I listed those off in chronological order, but moving forward, we're going to start with my least favorite and work up to my favorite of the bunch. Coming in at number 10, A Life Less Ordinary. This is a love story about Robert and Celine. Robert works for Celine's dad as a janitor. At least he did. At the beginning of the movie, he's fired and replaced by a robot. Out of anger and frustration and a little encouragement from Celine, Robert takes the boss's daughter hostage. With help or maybe hindrance from two angels sent down to Earth to keep an eye on the couple, the two save each other from life or death scenarios over and over again. It's an unusual plot, so the movie definitely gets points for uniqueness. It also hosts an amazing cast. Ewan McGregor lays claim to some of my favorite romantic moments in film. And Cameron Diaz plays stubborn and snobbish perfectly. You still like her character despite her bad attitude, maybe even because of it. I mean, Robert as a character is pretty infuriating. With Holly Hunter, Delroy Lindo, Stanley Tucci, Ian Holm, and even Timothy Olyphant making an appearance, there's no argument that this is an excellent cast. Despite that, the movie itself feels slightly stiff. Not in like a romantic way. There's very little chemistry between not only the main characters, but the cast as a whole. It doesn't feel like anyone's really listening to each other. So when you add in that magical element with the lack of magic between the characters, overall it just ends up feeling like a mess. And when it comes to the main character's romantic foundation, I have no idea why Celine and Robert fall in love with each other. It probably doesn't help that the characters themselves aren't very multidimensional, but after the angels are done messing with their lives, what's going to keep them together? I promise not to spoil the movies, so I'm not going to go into further detail, but yeah. As far as romantic foundation goes, I just don't think it's here. Despite the fact that A Life Less Ordinary isn't a very compelling romantic experience, it is still a really fun movie. There really is no other film like it. Plus, you get to see a young Ewan McGregor and Cameron Diaz before they hit their A-list status. If it's been a while since you've seen it, I'd say you could probably save yourself the time of rewatching. It's more likely better in your memory than it actually is in real life. Number 9, One Fine Day. One Fine Day is a story about two divorced single parents. Melanie, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, is an architect who's got a little boy named Sammy. Then you've got George Clooney, who plays Jack. When both parents arrive late for a field trip, their kids are forced to join them for their days at work. This leads to a lot of anxiety and frustration, not only for the parents, but also for their kids. So here's the thing. This movie is extremely stressful to watch. Not only is it extremely stressful, but the main characters don't start flirting with each other until over halfway through the movie. Once they do start liking each other, thankfully they have a decent amount of chemistry. But at that point, I was so stressed out, I kind of didn't really care anymore. Neither character is very likable, Jack with his mind games and Melanie with her judgmental attitude. The romantic foundation seems to be built on mutual physical attraction, and the other person being slightly less horrible than originally assumed. Jack continuously gives Melanie a hard time for finding it difficult to accept help, and Melanie assumes that Jack is just like her ex, only to find out that he's a little bit more reliable than she initially thought. But secretly, she's also right about him being similar to her ex. Now, this is only one day in their romantic story, so who's to say what will happen? Maybe Jack will be able to step up and be a supportive partner for her. But based on how much he prioritizes his job, how much they both prioritize their job, I don't see this relationship lasting. I spent most of this movie stressed the fuck out, and I think we're pretty far into the video now that I can curse without YouTube giving me a hard time about it. But yeah, I really didn't enjoy this movie. I mean, One Fine Day may not even qualify as a romantic movie based on my own definition, but I would argue that there really isn't much of a story to tell in the first place, with or without the romantic aspect. So, since I already watched it, I might as well include it, especially since it is considered to be a romantic movie. Why, I have no idea. The actors are charming despite being unlikable characters, and they do have some chemistry with each other. That chemistry is basically the only reason why it's number 9 instead of last place. If you haven't seen it, I wouldn't bother, and if you have, it's definitely not worth a rewatch. Number 8, As Good as It Gets. A successful writer named Melvin has OCD, and it controls his life. He also is an asshole to everyone around him. Not only is he an asshole, he's also racist, homophobic, and uses his abrasiveness to get what he wants. The only person who seems capable of putting up with his abusive behavior is a waitress at the restaurant Melvin frequents once a day for breakfast. When Melvin is forced to help a neighbor with his dog, his relationship with the canine and his interest in the waitress begins to have an effect on Melvin. As far as plots go, this is a pretty interesting one. The journey it takes you on is a pretty long one, but it's engaging the whole time. The acting is obviously phenomenal. Both Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt won Academy Awards for their performance in this film. Now, as far as the romantic aspect, well, there is a reason that I placed it at number 8. This is another movie that I wasn't exactly sure even qualified as a romance. The two leads don't really have chemistry together, intentionally. This is on purpose. But I would argue that there's actually a better connection between Jack and his neighbor. If I go back to my definition though, I don't think Melvin would have ultimately improved his relationship with his neighbor if it wasn't for his interest in Carol. So because of that, this movie is technically a romance, even though its most gratifying relationships are found elsewhere. The romantic foundation for this movie is a little difficult to discuss. These characters are probably the most human-like characters on the list, and for that reason, the relationship is obviously going to be complicated. Personally, I hate this romance for Carol. Like her, I'm a single mom in my 30s, and even though I don't have a kid that's continually sick, I can imagine the weight that's lifted off her shoulders when he's finally feeling better, thanks to Melvin. The gratitude and obligation she must feel for accepting his help must be quite the burden. Because of that, the whole situation feels so unromantic. How long is she going to feel obligated to put up with him if he doesn't improve? It's impossible for me to be happy for these characters in their final moments on screen. Here's the thing. I used to love this movie, and it's still a great movie, but after rewatching it, I don't find it as poignant and charming as I used to. Maybe because I'm older and a single mom, I understand the weight on Carol's shoulders better than I did in 1997, when I was 11 years old. Sure, Melvin drastically changes in a short period of time, and maybe someday he'll be a worthy partner for Carol. For her sake, though, I want so much more for her than this confusing, slightly toxic relationship that she finds herself in. Number 7, Jerry Maguire. Jerry is a sports agent who grows a conscience, gets fired, and ends up losing all but one of his clients. So Jerry starts up a new agency with Dorothy, a single mom who's willing to put her income on the line so that she can work for someone she believes in. The two connect romantically, but is this connection one that can move beyond the convenience of proximity into a true love? This is another plot, similar to As Good as It Gets, that's maybe a little too real to be enjoyable. On top of that, according to my own definition, this movie doesn't actually qualify as romance. I think without Jerry's relationship with Dorothy, the rest of the plot would have remained the same. There's still a story worth telling between Jerry and Rod, played by Cuba Gooding Jr. And yet, here it is at number 7, partly because I already watched it, but also partly because this movie has one of the most famous romantic scenes ever created. I said famous, not the best. Tom Cruise and Renee Zellweger do have a few moments of great chemistry between them, mainly because they're both great actors, but overall, the relationship is intentionally strained for a majority of the movie, and therefore it isn't a very enjoyable romantic experience. This movie is known as a classic romantic film, especially Tom Cruise's speech at the end. But I'm curious, do people still consider that scene to be romantic almost 30 years later? I certainly don't. Why does he love her? Because she believed in him? Why does he miss her? Because she wasn't there to share his good news with? Because she, quote unquote, completes him? How does she complete him? Tell me how she completes you, Jerry. Even by the end of the film, it doesn't feel like Jerry likes or even knows Dorothy all that well. But he's someone who doesn't want to be alone, so he goes back to her. I appreciate this movie for its honesty, and I do really enjoy the non-romantic plotlines, but I just can't get behind it anymore as a romance. If you're interested in watching a sports movie, this is a really good one. If it's romance you're looking for, I'd watch something else. Number 6, Sliding Doors. Helen arrives at work one morning and is promptly fired. As she heads down to catch the tube home, a little girl gets in the way and causes her to miss the train. Except she doesn't miss the train when the father moves his daughter just in time. Suddenly, we witness Helen on 2 different trajectories. One has her arriving home in time to catch her cheating boyfriend. The other has her arriving just as the other girlfriend leaves the apartment. For the rest of the movie, we watch both versions of Helen navigate her new life. Newly fired Helen and newly fired and newly single Helen. I love this premise. Both the juxtaposition is going to be a hard word to say. Let's try again. Both the juxtaposition of the 2 stories happening simultaneously, as well as witnessing how they eventually converge. It's such a unique and enjoyable plot. Gwyneth Paltrow is alright in this movie. She's definitely a charming actress, and I do love the chemistry between her and John Hannah. That is, when she's not depressed from losing her job and her relationship. Apparently, depressed Gwyneth looks exactly like sleepy Gwyneth. Once she comes out of that rut, though, Helen and James definitely have some pretty adorable chemistry. Their connection feels grounded and genuine. John keeps Helen company and encourages her to pursue her dreams, and when she's finally ready to move on, there's a solid romantic foundation waiting for her. Parting thoughts on this movie. Paltrow's eyebrows are extremely distracting at the beginning. They get better through the movie, but it's hard to focus on what she's saying at first. I do love this concept, and I thought it was done exceptionally well, ending with both a heartbreaking and hopeful conclusion. It's the best of both worlds, really, when it comes to romance movies. If you haven't seen this movie, definitely check it out. If you have seen it, I think you'd be okay not rewatching it. You can probably pass on this one. Number 5, It Could Happen to You. This movie is based on a true story. A cop goes into a diner for lunch but doesn't have enough money to tip the waitress, so he promises to return the next day. If he wins the lottery, he will tip her half of his winnings. If he doesn't win, he'll still return and give her a regular tip. Turns out he does end up winning $4 million, and much to the dismay of his wife, he ends up giving the waitress half. This is such a great plot, and it's even better when you know the story is true. It's one of those stranger than fiction moments. There's some really great character performances from Rosie Perez and Stanley Tucci, but my favorite performance of the movie has to be Bridget Fonda. She shines so brightly every time she's on screen. If you haven't seen the movie, she's reason enough to check it out. Nicolas Cage is okay. He's not terrible, and he's not great. There were only a few moments in the movie where I found his performance to be distracting. I can only imagine how much better this movie would have been with a different actor, though. Bill Pullman or Tom Hanks would have been great choices. But instead, we got Nick Cage. And unfortunately, there's very little chemistry between Charlie and Yvonne. The foundation is here, though. I can totally see why two kind-hearted people in terrible romantic relationships would end up falling for each other. The reason they connect feels right. It's just that there's no chemistry between the actors. The score for this movie is absolutely amazing. As soon as I heard it, all those nostalgic feelings came rushing back. Despite the lack of chemistry between the main characters, this is a classic feel-good romance story. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely put it at the top of your list. Even if you have seen it, I promise you will not be disappointed by a rewatch. Like I said, Bridget Fonda is reason enough. Number 4, Untamed Heart. Caroline is a young girl who keeps getting her heart broken. Adam doesn't talk much, but he notices everything. They work together at the same diner, but definitely don't run in the same social circles. One night, on her way home, Caroline is attacked and Adam saves her, getting her home safely. Slowly, Adam and Caroline get to know each other and break through each other's walls. It's a simple yet engaging plot. What really makes this movie special, though, is the cast. I don't know if you've ever seen a young Christian Slater in action, but that man can create chemistry like nobody's business. Marissa Tomei is no slouch either, and therefore their chemistry is off the charts. I think their romantic connection is one of my favorites, just for its simplicity. Adam loves Caroline even before he saves her. She's constantly getting hurt by these other men, completely confused as to why, and then here comes this man who saves her from a horrifying experience and loves her unconditionally. He also happens to be extremely thoughtful. Because she feels safe with him, she's able to be her own authentic self without having to worry about her affection scaring him off. There are a few moments that probably should have given Caroline pause. Some Edward Cullen shit that Adam pulls, but when she finally finds out about it in the movie, she's already head over heels, so she pretty much just accepts Adam for who he is and how he chooses to love her. One thing that stood out to me in this movie was the screenwriting. Maybe because one of the characters is a man of few words, that when he does speak, it has a much bigger impact than it normally would. I love how clearly the characters communicate with each other. It makes me wish that I could be that articulate. The experience of watching this movie is very satisfying in that regard. The film does require a trigger warning though. There's an SA and attempted R scene. It starts around 21 minutes into the movie and is over by the 27-minute mark, in case you're interested in just skipping it. That being said, this really is a very heartwarming movie. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend watching it. There's nothing like Marissa Tomei and Christian Slater creating chemistry with each other. Number 3, You've Got Mail. Kathleen and Joe are AOL pen pals. They also happen to be business rivals. Throughout the movie, they continue to connect with each other online while they butt heads in real life. I like this plot. It feels original and familiar at the same time. There's one aspect of the plot that I don't like, what happens with Kathleen's shop, the shop around the corner. It's important to the story, and it ends up turning out for the best, but it still is a major bummer when it comes to the couple's romantic foundation. It would take a very charming person and a very strong connection for me personally to get over what Joe does to Kathleen. Outside of that, though, this couple is actually a really good match for each other. My eye is twitching. Thankfully, you can't see it on the screen. My eye's twitching! As a couple, I think they would continue to encourage each other to be the best versions of themselves for a long time to come. And for that reason, I do really like their relationship. And let's be real here. There's not much better in the romantic movie genre than the chemistry between Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. It's by no means a passionate chemistry, but they both have that struck by lightning look down to a science at this point. It feels so dynamic even now, decades later. I love the very specific moment in time that this story is set in. It feels like a time capsule almost, bringing back memories from when I was in elementary and middle school. I definitely enjoyed this movie on the rewatch, and if you haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a while, I would definitely recommend it. It's easy and fun, plus the cast is great. I didn't even talk about Greg Kinnear and Parker Posey, but they're awesome in this movie just as much as Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. Definitely give it a watch. Number 2, The Cutting Edge. Kate is a figure ice skater who loses her skating partner after an embarrassing performance at the Olympics. At the same time, an up-and-coming pro hockey player named Doug experiences an injury on the ice that gives him a blind side. He will never play professional hockey again. A few years later, Doug is recruited to train as Kate's new skating partner. The two are like oil and water. Doug obviously has a lot to work on to become an equal partner for Kate, and Kate makes sure he knows that every step of the way. Both characters are insanely stubborn and extremely competitive, and it pushes both of them to become the best versions of themselves on and off the ice. I really enjoyed this movie, obviously, because it's number 2. It's not a new concept, but I think this movie does a great job of reimagining the amateur to professional trope, while also including a little bit of Taming of the Shrew in there. I don't think it's just a coincidence that the main character is named Kate. The chemistry between these two characters is really great. They've got this fire when they butt heads on the ice, but then their romantic chemistry feels grounded and gentle by comparison. The movie really takes its time with their progression from enemies to lovers, leaving their relationship feeling grounded and realistic. I could definitely see these two bringing out the best in each other for the rest of their lives, which made the story that much more enjoyable. Other than the terrible way the skating scenes were shot, this movie has really stood the test of time. The plot is great, the acting is great, the chemistry is there. I do wish that they had made Moira Kelly's character a little bit more multidimensional, made her feelings about ice skating known earlier in the movie. It felt like the effort to explain her change in attitude was kind of crammed into the last 20 minutes. At the end of the day, though, I would highly recommend watching this movie, especially if you're a fan of Dirty Dancing. Number 1, While You Were Sleeping. Lucy is a lonely transit worker who has a crush on a guy she sees take the train every day. When the guy is attacked and falls onto the tracks, Lucy saves him from being run over by the train. Through a miscommunication at the hospital, his family's told that she's his fiancée. Lucy tries and fails to tell them the truth numerous times. At first, it's because the family's so boisterous it's hard to get a word in. Eventually, though, it becomes about not wanting to lose this new connection she's made. It's a great story, but one of my biggest pet peeves in romance movies, it's when a character doesn't speak up and lets a situation get totally out of control. So the fact that this movie is based on that trope and it's still at the top of my list tells you just how well they were able to accomplish it. Lucy has spent who knows how long romanticizing this non-existent relationship with Peter. Then she falls in love with his family and eventually creates a connection with his brother. Unlike Peter, the romance that Lucy creates with Jack is based off of, well, reality, for one thing, but also mutual respect. They push each other to be the best versions of themselves, and because of that, their romantic foundation feels really strong. Sandra Bullock is such a charming lead. She's one of my favorite female romance movie actors. And Bill Pullman definitely brings the energy with the way that he engages with her. Lucy's speech at the end is one of my favorite romantic movie speeches, way better than Jerry's. While You Were Sleeping is definitely worth a watch, and a rewatch, and a rewatch. You know, if you're in the need for some fuzzy feels and heartwarming energy. So yeah. That's our first 10 movies in the bag. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Which one of these was your favorite and your least favorite? Do you prefer more realism to your romance movies, or does the fantastic and unbelievable make for a more enjoyable experience? What is your favorite 90s romantic movie of all time? Maybe it's one that I don't have on my list and I can watch it. I hope you enjoyed this video and my movie reviews and that I've inspired you to watch some of them. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end, and until next time.